Welcome everybody to this lesson on loops, and more specifically the while loop. So what we're going to look at first is what is the purpose of a loop. Okay, and the purpose of a loop is to repeat code over and over in a row. This is a special distinction to understand because it is about being in a row. We will talk about something much later on that you would use if you want to repeat code and not have it in a row one after the other. But in this case, you want to make sure that this is code that will be repeated one after another in a row with nothing between them. Okay? So the first one we're going to look at is what happens if we want to, let's say, print out hello world. Well, if we want to print it once, we write the statement print hello world. If we want to do it 5 times right now, we would just write it 5 times, probably copy and paste it. If I want to do it 10 times, probably copy and paste it to 10 times. But what happens if I want to do this 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times? Well, suddenly copying and pasting doesn't seem so practical. So what we're going to use is something called a while loop. So a while loop works very similarly to an if statement or a selection statement in the way that it has its structure is created. So let's go over the if statement really quickly before we do that. If we want to create an if statement, the first thing I'm going to do is have a variable. I'm going to create one called num, give it a value of 10. And then I'm going to write my selection statement. So I'm going to write if, I'm going to write a condition. In this case, num is greater than 3. Since num is 10, it is greater than 3, so this will value to true. And it will do whatever is inside the body of the if statement. In this case, I will make a print statement that says the if statement body will run. That way we know it runs. If I were to run this, you'll notice that I have my 10 hello worlds up here, and then my if statement's body will run part here. Now, while loops work the same way, but instead of running once, when they get to their end of their body, like down here, instead of continuing on and running the rest of my code, it will loop back and go back to my condition and run as long as that condition is true. So, let's create one. I'm going to create a variable num, and I'm going to say its value is 0. I'm going to create my while statement, and exactly the same as my if statement, it will start with the word while instead of if, followed by a condition. My condition this time is num is less than 3 instead of greater than 3, and then I will have a colon to signify that I'm going to start the body of my while loop. Inside, I will put something that I want to run many times. In this case, I will write a print statement that says my while loop body of this code will run, so we know that the while loop body runs when we see that statement. And if I were to run this right now, well, what happens is I will get to the end of my code, and I'm going to return back and check my condition again. Well, if I can check this condition, num is 0, so therefore if num is less than 3, I will go through, run the code, I'll print out my body, and it'll come back, and it'll check it, and num's value still is less than 3, so it will continue through. Go to the end of the loop, come back, and this is going to continue and continue and continue. And since we have no way of this ever becoming false, my while loop will continue to run infinitely. Okay? So if the condition never changes, in other words, if our variable never changes, we're going to run infinite. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to add something to this that will move our variable towards making our condition false. So, since right now our value is 0, and we want it to approach 3, so be equal to 3, or greater than 3, what we want to do is we want to increase the value of num. So to do this, I'm going to write num is equal to num plus 1. So what this will do is it'll increase the value of num every single time our loop runs. So the first time through, num's value is 0, since we created that up here. We will run the body, we'll print out our while loop, then we'll come down our while loop body print statement, then we'll run down here, then we'll say num is equal to num plus 1. So we're going to replace the value of num with the value it currently has plus 1. Since its current value is 0, we do 0 plus 1, and num's value is now 1. We get to the end of our loop, we return back, and we find out, okay, is 1 less than 3? It is. This evaluates to true. We run what's inside the body, we run our print statement, we come down. We replace num's value with num plus 1. So we're going to replace num with 1 plus 1, which means num value is now 2. We get to the end of our loop, we come back, 2 is less than 3. So we're going to go in again, we're going to do our print statement, we're going to come down, we're going to do OK, we're going to replace it with 2 plus 1, which is 3. We're going to get to the end of our loop and go back. 3 is not less than 3, it is equal to it, so this is now false. So we're going to skip past all the code inside the while loop and go to our next statement, which will be a print statement that says the loop is over. So if we think about this, we ran this loop when num's value was 0. We increased it by 1, so we ran it when it was 1. We increased it by 1 again, so we ran it when it was 2. So that means we ran through this 3 different times. So this statement, our print statement, should run 3 times before the loop is over statement. Okay? If I run this, I have my 10 hello worlds, I have my if statement, I have my while loop statement, which ran 3 times for 0, 1, and 2. And then finally, when it was 3, we skipped the whole while loop, and we wrote our last statement, the loop is over. Now, there's one extra thing we're just going to go over quickly. While loops can be used with any comparison, so we don't just have to compare numbers. We can do strings like we have in if statements. We can use booleans. We can do any of that. I'm not going to get into that into this video because I won't do it until we have introduced our second type of loops and we need to differentiate between the two of them.